through this interview, you've named a lot of people, like really famous people that have made a
legendary
mark on America and has made a mark on the world. Frank Sinatra and all these people. Of all of these people that you've met, is there one person that really sticks out, that really made an impression on you?
Just to let you know, because you should know. This is one show I've been looking really forward to because it's an old friend of mine, Steve Bender. You probably saw his documentary. It's out now, the Elvis documentary. And Steve Bender, we go back about 40 years, and we're going to talk to him about what it was like in Hollywood back then, his career, because it's more than this documentary, and all the successes he had. And I want you to watch this one because this is a man you want to get to meet, Steve Bender.
This way, he'll cue us in.
Sound check's cool?
Sounds good.
All right.
Are we on? We're on. Okay, so hello, Steve Bender. Hello,
Frank.
Steve.
Hey.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people watching you because you're super popular with your new Elvis documentary coming out. But I think we should start this show by breaking the ice because I've known you for probably longer than anyone who has interviewed you has known you. Am I right?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 40.
Yeah,
over 40 years.
Right. The last time Steve and I hung out was 40 years ago.
And I think that was mostly in
Paramount.
Those are the days of Paramount, and
Right.
also Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey
Bailey
Circus,
Circus,
which
right.
he did in St. Petersburg,
Right.
Florida.
Yeah, we had the Patti LaBelle special. I was in that one. Remember that reminds me. You filmed the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Correct.
And you had LeVon. Who was that guy?
LeVon Burton. No. It was
Who was the guy?
the
actor.
guy who got injured.
Yeah, wasn't that LeVon?
He got injured. He got hit by a car, too.
Ben Vereen.
Ben
Ben
Vereen,
Vereen,
yeah. Somebody ran him over.
No.
Yes, somebody did run Ben Vereen over.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
on
we're not,
Pacific Coast Highway.
That's
as a matter
correct.
of fact.
Yeah, he was crossing, and it was an actor
Yeah.
who ran him over.
Yeah.
Who ran him over?
was he a jealous actor?
No, it was an accident.
Okay, so we're not talking about that. We're talking about when we're filming that show. Steve goes, "Hey Frank, you're gonna dress like a clown because there's this one scene where there's a captain on the airlines, and he goes, Captain, I can't control the passengers. They're going completely nuts. They're acting like clowns." And then there was a view of a long shot going through, the 727 or whatever he used at that time, and there's all professional clowns, Ringling Brothers.
Yeah,
So
I
he
remember.
put me in wardrobe, and I dressed as one of the professional clowns, and so did your daughter. So we had a good time. There's so many good times that happened in Florida.
Those were incredible years, and I kind of grew to the point of where I never saw any animal abuse of any kind. But on the other hand, I know there were times, for instance, I heard that it was really difficult to train bears. And
Bears on bicycles?
We had a bear act, and I know that the trainer used fear on that bear to get him to do all the tricks, which was horrible.
Right.
And in a strange way, though, I enjoyed directing the circus, because the circus is like no other entertainment vehicle, where there are no executives in the circus.
Right.
Everybody works
Right.
and has a job. I got to know Gunther Gable Williams, the greatest animal trainer in the world. And Gunther, when he wasn't the star of the circus, he was out there working with, putting the tent
Everything,
up,
right. Anything that had to be done.
Exactly.
Hands-on.
Everybody.
Right. It was a traveling show on a train.
And then I remember, I think Richard Thomas was the first guest, and it was the first time Ringling ever allowed anyone on the circus train. And Richard did a whole intro on the train while we were 3, 4, 5 in the morning were on the back roads in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
And
It was the blue train, right? Because there was a red train, blue train, whatever.
well, there were two circuses
Right.
that Ringling Brothers owned. One was called the Blue Unit, which
Right.
was Gunther Gable Williams' German circus that Ringling bought,
Okay.
or the Felds bought. And the other was the Red Unit, which was the traditional Ringling Brothers show with a different animal trainer and cast and crew and so forth. The first year, I was excited about doing it and decided on my own to throw a party for everybody.
Oh,
So
yes.
it was interesting to me
remember
because I asked if I could get a photo of the whole circus.
Right.
And the owner of the circus, Ken Feld, said, half of these people don't ever want their photograph taken for fear
Right,
that,
right.
you know, they
Wanted.
jump their
Yeah,
bail
right,
or
right.
whatever it is. And,
Carnies.
exactly.
Right.
But it was great camaraderie. I mean, I never saw so many different, you know, people from different backgrounds, from different countries, et cetera, bond together.
Yeah, it was all really international. A lot of people didn't speak English.
Yeah, exactly. And when Chucko the Clown was so proud of his new living quarters on the train, and I went to see it with him, and it was like half, if that,
Right.
of a normal room.
Right. And he was so happy.
And yet,
Right.
you know, he felt
Promoted.
You know, exactly.
Yeah, and respected.
And but those were great years of experience for me. And we had Michelle Lee, we had Sugar Ray Leonard on the show with his son.
Right.
We had Barbara Mandrell. It was a lot of fun, and I'm thank God that there were no serious accidents while I was involved
You know,
in it.
when you were at the circus, and Frank called me, and he goes, "You're not going to believe what happened." I go, "What?" He goes, "This guy. I just watched this guy eat it." I go, "Who?" Ben Vereen. So what happened to him? Like,
Do you remember, Steve?
I remember
yeah.
exactly.
Okay,
what
tell us.
happened
Yeah.
was in rehearsal.
Right, I remember his
Yeah.
rehearsal. We're sitting out there.
They were doing, families were doing pyramids where they would do
Stack
it like
up on each other.
5 high,
Right.
you know. And we wanted to integrate Ben into one
Top of the
these-
pyramid.
one of these acts and put
I
him at
remember.
the top of it. And the top of it, up until Ben, was a 9-year-old kid.
Right.
And you know, they rehearsed. Well, the father of a lot of the performers in that pyramid group was playing macho with Ben,
Right.
and said, "Let's not use the safeties in
Right.
case anybody falls or whatever. You know, that's not going to happen, so
Right.
don't worry about it." And so during rehearsal in the afternoon, Ben, who was very athletic,
Yeah, I remember.
you know, he goes to the top of the pyramid and he starts to lose his balance, and
Yes.
as a result, the kid below him can't hold him
Can't
up,
hold him. He's collapsed.
and the entire pyramid
Right.
falls.
Oh.
And Ben actually breaks his shoulder bone.
Yeah, he
Oh,
landed
God.
right on his
And-
back. I was there. I
and-
saw the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no.
And when the owner of the circus found out about it, he went bananas, and I don't blame him, because just from an insurance standpoint.
Right. Well, you got a top
said-
Hollywood star that has a broken shoulder during a rehearsal. Not good.
Exactly. And then when we actually did the show, Ben, being the trooper that he is,
Yeah.
and I worked with Ben a lot over the years
Yeah,
in
he
other
went for it.
situations, with even a broken shoulder.
Right.
He performed it
Yeah.
in front of the live audience,
saw it, yeah.
and he pulled it off, and
Right.
they didn't have a problem. They all wore their safeties.
It would be a different.
You know.
It'd be a different ball game today if somebody had that kind of injuries. You'd
Yeah.
have 30,000,
Attorneys.
attorneys.
He'd be covered with attorney business
I'm going to
cards.
remind you of this one thing that happened there. See if you remember it. Do you remember the Frenchman with the bison? You know, he had the only bison that would kneel down. Do you remember there was a buffalo, and that buffalo ran down, and he goes, "Hey," and the buffalo got away. Were you aware
I
of
don't
that?
remember that.
Okay,
What I
so-
do remember is that we were rehearsing the opening parade around excuse me. We were rehearsing the opening where the entire circus travels around the track with all the clowns and the elephants and what have you. And we had in the circus a wonderful little person named Mishu, the smallest person I ever saw in my life. In fact, he tried to get my attention one day, and I wondered, who's tapping on my kneecap, you know?
How
And I
tall?
looked
How
down,
tall?
and there,
He was like the part of the Ringling Brothers. They would always have the weirdest thing on both sides. So this was like the smallest human alive, and he was
Yeah.
like this. He was like
he,
probably like 32 inches or something. I don't know. He was a small
yeah,
guy.
he was so small.
But he's
and-
proportionate.
And I think when Pee Wee Herman did his circus movie, he hired
Yeah.
Mishu to be in
Yeah,
his
Michio
movie.
got popular.
And he did.
Yeah.
And it was, what happened in rehearsal is that this carriage was being pulled by these beautiful white horses. I think they were from Austria or something like that. And they were standing very, very quietly, and Barbara was about to get into the carriage. And unannounced to any of us, the audio man decided to test out his sound. And the idea was that Barbara would sing while they're pulling this carriage around the track.
Right.
And as a result, he blasts the sound on these speakers that were attached. Sorry about that. We have,
That's it. Another fan calling.
yeah,
Another interview.
yeah. And so
We're in Steve's house right now. That's where we're getting the phone
Yeah.
call. So this is like actually at his house. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
the horses freaked out
Right.
from the sound, and they were startled, and all of a sudden they took off. Thank God Barbara Mandrell did not get in the carriage.
Yeah.
So she's standing outside watching like the rest of us. The door of the carriage is swinging open back and forth, and these horses are at full speed going around the track. And we had these huge, in the arena, these huge steel doors, but they were
Open, right.
And Gunther Gable-Williams, the animal trainer, immediately springs to action and screams, "Close those doors,"
right.
because if, God forbid, those horses
Get out
got
of the
out
arena.
of the arena, they could have killed a
Right.
pedestrian just
Right.
walking by or
Right.
whatever. And that was
Well, maybe they hid it from you.
terrifying.
But there was a buffalo, a bison, that they said no one could train a bison. It was in your show. And they said, don't make sure, because sometimes the bison didn't listen. And it was a French guy. And I remember being by the train. I was with these guys. And maybe you're in production, because, I was hanging out in Florida and I was with the circus guys. So we're all hanging out. And all I heard was this Frenchman say, "Look out! Look out!" And we look and something's coming our way. And we dove into the train, and this buffalo. Buffaloes are huge.
Yeah,
they're
giant.
like 6, 7. I mean, they're big things. Runs by and it's out of control, and it just kept going.
Went
and
through the gates.
And then the French guy was chasing it. "Look out!" And it was like, and I was going, maybe they never told you about that. Like, don't tell the producer, but that actually happened. It's a big
Yeah.
bison buffalo thing.
Yeah.
And the same guy had zebras. Remember, he had the zebras that you're not supposed to be able to tame.
Well,
They're
the only animal that I heard, and Gunther Gable-Williams told me
Yeah.
that he couldn't train, was a giraffe.
Oh,
And he tried desperately. He had a little giraffe with him, a very young one, and he was trying to train it, on the circus lot. But he told me they're impossible to actually get him to
right.
do tricks or whatever. So I was kind of happy, to be honest with you, when I started to read, the SPCA got involved,
Right.
and Ken Feld kind of agreed that it was time to pack it in.
Tie with pack it in. Because you don't know what they were doing to the animals to train them. What you see is the end result, and this animal's trained, and you don't think like, are you abusing this animal? Because I know you're super, and me too, we're both animal lovers, and oftentimes I say I like animals and dogs better than people, so.
Well, I have a
You don't-
theory that you're going to be judged in the afterlife
Yeah.
by the way you treat animals
exactly.
in this life.
No, I agree.
And I've
So that
always
was-
felt that way.
That was cool. They shut it down. But one thing I do remember is you, in order to get the elephants from the train to the tent, it's called the elephant walk. And they put all those 18, I think there's 18 elephants. And you asked me, do you want to ride on an elephant? And I'm like, how do I ride on an elephant? And I don't know, just go there. I'm thinking there's going to be like a saddle. I'm picturing a horse saddle. And so I was on the number one elephant. And you sit behind the ears, right on the neck. And there is no seat. And I remember like almost doing the splits because this was the biggest elephant. It was a number one elephant leading the rest of the elephants. And his ears were hitting my thighs. And as he's going up, his shoulder blades are going like this. And I'm like, I really think I may slide off this elephant. That's the
What are
only
you
thing-
holding on to? Do you have a harness?
No, there's nothing to hold on to. You're just squeezing him with your legs and you're kind of touching the back of his head. But these elephants are super smart. And sometimes they get pissed. And if they don't want you on, the trunk comes way over. And it did a couple times, not to throw me off. You have to get to know the elephant. I was with the elephant for like 3 or 4 days, and it smelled me. And then they look, their eyes looking at you, and they're like a dog. They either like you or they don't like you. And this one liked me. So you had to know the elephant.
They have eyelashes.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
elephant
big
eyelashes.
eyelashes.
But I remember almost falling off that thing a few times on the way to the ride. I was just hoping I wouldn't fall off because elephants are huge.
Yeah,
and you're falling
you
off.
need it. It's
yeah.
a step on you.
Yeah, I get a step on you. So thanks for putting me on that elephant.
He's trying to get rid of you.
Yeah,
I
let Frank do
love-
it. Yeah.
I love animals, and
So do
I
I.
especially love the elephants, and hope
Yeah.
as a society worldwide
Yeah.
that we think enough of them to save the species, because they
Yeah.
are disappearing
Yes.
every year.
Every year, yeah, the habitat's being devastated. They're getting poached by the thousands, not the hundreds, the thousands a year. They're
Yeah.
still doing the poachers, and they actually have these people inside of those places that live out there. There's tribes. It's kind of like the same people that take care of the gorillas. If you go to the mountain gorillas, there's actually groups of people that spend their life traveling with the gorillas. They follow them all over, and if there's a poacher, come bye poacher, because they're well armed and they're not messing around. But the same they have to do with the elephants. But the black market is still there. It's disgusting.
Well, they're going for the ivy.
Yeah, for the
ivory.
tucks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, a shot to the head. If you ever, most people listening to this podcast have never even probably touched an elephant. I don't know, but if you ever worked around elephants or been around elephants, they're really, really, really smart, and they get to know you, and you can tell just by the way they're looking at you. They have a memory, and they know exactly who you are. They know your voice, they know your look, and they.
Well,
and if-
growing up in the 60s and early 70s at the San Diego Zoo, everybody's most world famous zoo,
Right.
they would sell you peanuts to feed the elephants.
Right.
So you put your hand out with the peanuts and they grab the peanuts out. You remember this? Well, one day my mom was there and she was feeding the elephant, and this elephant grabbed her purse, remember?
Right. Yeah, I remember.
And my dad and my elephant got in a struggling match because he's trying to pull the purse out of the elephant's trunk. But Frank, let me ask you something, because you're bringing back some memories. Because I remember when Steve, I think it was you did the Academy Awards, didn't you?
I did the Emmys.
Emmys,
Right, the
Emmys,
Emmys.
Grammys.
Nationally for 4 years, and I did it at each one of the networks. That's when they had what they called the wheel. And you'd be at CBS one year and NBC the next year and ABC the next year. And then when Fox came into the picture, Fox became the fourth of the wheel.
How did you know? How did you guys decide on who's going to be the host?
That was, what goes on behind the scenes, which the public is never,
Privy
in
to.
on.
Because it seems like it'd be.
Has a lot to do with, the program director, the sponsor. I mean, you get too many cooks in the soup. And what they're trying, obviously, is to get the biggest name of popularity in the entertainment business to host the show, and normally each network wants their most popular star on it. So
Right.
it's very rare if you were
Right.
at NBC that you had a
At
CBS
CBS,
star.
Who were the
hosting.
hosts when you did it? If you can you
Oh,
recall?
I remember Eddie Murphy and
Ooh.
Joan Rivers co-hosted.
Oh.
Tom Selleck
Yeah.
hosted
Good.
one year. Let me think who else did it. But the Emmys, to me, was one of the easiest shows you could possibly direct because, and especially today, because you basically have little or no entertainment other than the presenters and the acceptors, and
Yeah, that's true.
and
And okay-
unfortunately, it's all about every entity in the entertainment business wants to be acknowledged in prime time if they can in the Emmys, and as a result, you have two podiums, stage left and stage right, and that's it.
That's it.
And
Yeah, it was-
and
you're right.
then you've got to identify all the stars out in the audience,
Right.
and before the show even began or begins, the art department puts blow-ups of huge photographs of the stars in the seats that they're going to be in, so the camera crew can orient themselves when,
Okay, where
when
they're
they
gonna
get
be.
the call
Got it.
that you
Yeah.
want shots
You want
of
a shot,
certain
yeah, you want-
people. They know where they're sitting.
So how did you get from Steve Binder as a child when you were like in elementary school to hosting the Emmys? Where did this start? Like, how did you get involved in this in Hollywood?
Yeah, what brought you into showbiz?
Yeah.
Was it planned?
Yeah.
Never planned. I never ever, though I grew up in Los Angeles, right next to Hollywood, it never entered my mind that I would be in the entertainment business. The closest thing I ever came to it, we had a very famous film actress living on our block named Jean Tierney. She was in some wonderful motion pictures. One was called Laura. That was a murder mystery with Dana Andrews as her co-star, playing a detective, thinking she was dead, and it turns out that it was her roommate who was murdered, and she's still alive and comes back.
Yeah.
And then you have to find out who the murderer is
Right,
and
got
so
it.
forth, which I think was Clifton Webb.
Yeah, that's good.
And she was considered one of the most beautiful women in
showbiz
Hollywood at the time. And when she lived on our block, which were modest middle-class homes, but turned out to be a wonderful street and neighborhood. There were many touch football games played.
Right, old school.
Yeah, Sandlot
Yeah.
stuff.
Right,
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
Southern
Exactly.
California stuff, the way we did it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
But-
you're on the street, so
So what happened was my first taste of show business, I lived a few blocks from a huge public park. And I lived there. I'd come home from school, head to the park, whether it was baseball season or football season or basketball season. I was there every day. And it was the only person that was pretty famous in show business in our neighborhood was a young actor named Tommy Cook. And he was a radio actor. He played Little Beaver for the Red Ryder.
oh my gosh.
Wow.
You got jets
seldom
flying?
get airplanes like that flying overhead.
Yeah,
You're following us.
right.
And Tommy rounded up a group of us, and I think at the time I was probably 9 years old or 10 years old, and they were making a Laurel and Hardy
Wow.
movie, and they had a scene with a kid football team, and I remember being shuttled to MGM Studios in Culver City,
It's action.
and then it turns out that the baseball coach when they started picking us to be in this movie, he decided his son wasn't there, and as a result, I never got to do the movie because he put his son in my place. But other than that, I had no desire to be in show business. And at the time, I was when I was a young adult, I was going to the University of Southern California, and I was registered in pre-med. The truth being, I never wanted to be a doctor. I just wanted to make my parents proud and,
Exactly.
and do something that would make them proud of me. And it was a case of where I had the opportunity to become a radio announcer at KUSC, which was the local university radio station. And I started announcing classical chamber music from the LA County Museum, and had a great time because it was just me and a microphone and nobody else other than the engineer and maybe one or two students
Easy
from
gig.
SC.
Yeah.
And I found basically in my normal life I was pretty introverted. But once I was alone with that microphone, I could identify with, to me, if one person was listening,
You're
that
happy.
was
Right.
that was
Success.
the only
Right.
thing that was important. And as a result, I started to get some jobs in other divisions of the university where the Air Force hired me to narrate some training films for the Air Force. And I got an actual paycheck. I couldn't believe it.
For
and
talking.
it was probably about $30 or something like that. But it was a real paycheck for doing that. And as a result, I ended up, when I got drafted in the Army, they immediately wanted to put me in the medical corps because of my college background. But I talked myself into getting into, in the beginning, what was called the Blue Danube Network, which was all over Austria. And Austria at the time, in 1954, was an occupied country.
By the Germans.
The Russian, no.
Was it the Russians?
No, it was the Russians, the French, the English, and the Americans.
Oh.
And they used to drive around, the MPs, the military police of each country, used to drive together in jeeps in every city and sort of were a collective multi-country
It's like-
occupation.
Like Interpol.
Yeah, and I remember going to Vienna one year on a train on the Orient Express, which was pretty exciting to me. And but we had to keep the shades down because the Russians had training camps from Austria, Salzburg to Vienna, and they didn't want Americans looking at their soldiers training in the field and so forth. And it was amusing to me because when I got to Vienna, all the Americans kind of headed for the bars and playful things, and the Russians were marched into museums in Vienna, etc. And I realized right then and there, and the kind of the difference between our freedoms in America and the discipline of
Like,
being.
we're in Germany, let's party. It's like,
Now we're going to Natural History Museum.
And,
that's more fun.
Anyway, to make a long story short, is I went from Austria when they gave Austria back to the Austrian government. We moved into Germany, and I was a radio announcer in Munich, Germany, and Nuremberg, Germany, and had some great experiences and met a lot of people, Americans who came over to work for Radio Free Europe, and it was quite an operation. And the German announcers, I remembered distinctly, were amazed that American disc jockeys didn't need a script in front of them. We could improvise and I did a show called the Munich Night Train music show, playing records and so
Right.
forth. And we had access to, all, they would, from Hollywood at AFN, they would send us these huge discs of all our favorite shows when we were civilians in America, that had all the records you ever heard in your life, practically, all the drama shows,
Everything.
everything. And it was an incredible experience. Well, I had met a gentleman who was working for Radio Free Europe at the time, and his wife, who were living in Munich. And they sort of adopted me and would invite me over to their apartment to have dinner once in a while, and we'd go to a movie. And his name was Jerry Hausner, and Jerry had done like 100 Lucille Ball shows,
Episodes.
playing the bartender and so forth. And he was partners with an actor named Jim Backus. And Jim Backus,
I remember that name.
Gilligan's
Gilligan's
Island.
Island, right? He was he was Mr. Howell,
You
Thurston
got
Howell
it.
the third.
Exactly. And
Memory.
so Jerry said, and Jerry was when Jim Backus did the voice of Mr. Magoo, which was a
remember
very
him.
popular animated
Yeah.
cartoon. Jerry was Gerald McBoing Boing, his sidekick. And Jerry said, you should get into radio when you go back and become a civilian again. And he set up a meeting for me at CBS Radio with the director of Mr. Magoo, Pete Burness. And we go to CBS in Hollywood, and I meet the program director. And the first thing he asked me is, are you the son of Art Linkletter, who was a famous radio
Yeah, we know Art.
personality?
Yeah.
And I said, no. And I was confused by the question. He said, well, if you're not the son of a famous person who's already successful in radio, you'll never get a job in Hollywood. And, you got to go to Iowa or New Jersey or someplace and get a job on a local radio station, spend a few years there, and then eventually you'll be experienced enough to come back to Hollywood and apply for a job in Hollywood. Well, it so pissed me off that I said, the heck with that. And I left his office, and as opportunity has it, I called an old high school friend of mine, and we had lunch, and he said, Steve, what are your plans? And I said, well, I'm waiting for the summer to end so I can re-enroll and finish my college education. And he said, well, instead of just hanging out and doing nothing for the next few months, why don't you try and get a job at a studio or a network? Because there are a lot of pretty girls running around on their campuses, and you might get lucky and
Meet the
and
women.
meet somebody. Exactly. So I did apply at CBS, and I applied at KABC, which is the ABC affiliate. And CBS called me a few days later and said there's a typing job open. Well, I had taken one typing job in junior high school. I could probably type maybe 20 or 30 words a minute.
Right.
They're looking for 100 words a minute.
Okay, no.
And at the same time, I got a call from KBC saying there's a mailroom job open. Would you be interested in that?
That's where that was.
And so I had to swear to the guy who was in charge of the mailroom that I never wanted to do anything in my life except deliver mail
Except the mailroom,
for
yeah.
him.
You're here
And
for
he,
mail.
He was all about loyalty.
Right.
And so I got the job, and it was a great job because I wasn't confined to an office.
Right.
And I got to walk on the lot and deliver mail to all the various departments and so forth. And I went to the programming bungalow, and lo and behold, the head of programming at that time was a gentleman named Selig Seligman. And he was the head of KABC, the local affiliate of the network. And he was, said, come on in.
Right.
So I walk in his office, and he said, have you got time to chat? And I said, yeah. And we sat down, and he said, what would you like to be doing? And I said, I'd like to be sitting in your seat asking you that question.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And he laughed and started this long conversation of who I was and what I was doing. And he was fascinated that I just come back from Germany and
right.
Europe, because he was, as it turns out, aside from being the, I think, brother-in-law of the head of ABC television at that time, he was a lawyer at the Nuremberg trials after World War II. And
Crazy.
a real interesting guy. And as a matter of fact, he was responsible for a successful ABC series called Combat.
I remember.
And unfortunately, when they were filming Combat with Vic Morrow, who
Yes.
had that tragic helicopter death,
Right.
the back lot at MGM was like sacrosanct. I mean, it had all those great Gene Kelly and movies and Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney and you name them. And when Combat was shooting on the back lot, they were shooting into these sets. They were destroying them. All these, irreplaceable classic
Right.
movie sets and so forth. And so it was so fortuitous, because he said, Steve, have you ever directed anything? And I said, no. And he said, do you think you could do it?
Oh no.
And I said, I don't know until I'm given the opportunity to try. I said, I'm pretty good at picking up things I don't know and learning them. And he said, well, one of our local directors is moving over to CBS, and he's going to direct the Jack Benny show. Jack was a huge radio comedian, and he transferred over when television hit to do the Jack Benny show, which was super successful.
Yeah, for years.
And we're looking for a replacement for him on KABC. And I've got 1,000 guys standing in line waiting to see if they can get the job. But I got a funny feeling about you. And if you're interested, I'd like you to meet the director who's leaving. And he took me up to the stage where they were doing a show with the director. Turned out to be, his name was Norman Abbott, and he was, I guess, a nephew to the famous Abbott and Costello comedy team. And he was very friendly. When I walked in the control booth and I heard all this foreign language of, the commands that he was making to his camera crew of set up and dissolve and ready and take, and it sounded like a foreign language. I didn't know anything. So I told Selig I'm not sure I could do it because it's just so foreign to me. And he said, well, sleep on it. And Norman invited me back the next day, and I went back the next day. And it was like a secret code that you can decipher, and all of a sudden it opened up the window of being able to understand what directors basically were doing. I had no experience whatsoever. And he said, if you're interested, I want to give you the opportunity. And I ended up being a full-fledged director on KABC in the Radio Television Directors Guild at the exact same time when the Screen Directors Guild decided to merge
with the radio.
with the radio directors.
Oh, so you're in.
And so I was grandfathered into the Directors Guild of America.
Oh.
I think I had to pay $50
that was a
or something
lucky
like
thing
that.
for you.
How old were you when
22?
when you became
No, I really wasn't.
probably 26,
I was, let me think, I went into the Army
you're right,
when I was
'cause he was in the
19.
right?
So I came back at 22. So you're right. I was around 20, 23,
Yeah.
22, 23
Don't ever doubt your
years
brother,
old.
man. I'm always right. Okay. So you're
But
22.
You're right.
So you're.
See, I didn't doubt.
I mean,
I
all-
ended up doing a slew of KBC shows, which included a painter who converted his craft into being called Chuckle the Clown, which was a popular
huge.
KBC
Right.
show. And I ended up directing Al Jarvis in a dance show of swing, waltz, and cha-cha. I directed so many
what
of
about
their...
Steve Allen's show? Did you do a little bit? Would
Well,
you-
that came later. That's
later.
when
Oh, these
I
are the
walked away
beginnings.
from...
Right.
And I was lucky enough to be assigned to do, which was the most popular afternoon show, probably in the history of KBC, with a slapstick comedian called Soupy Sales.
Yeah, Super Sales.
And
Friday.
we were on 5
He
days
was
a week.
so good.
And kids, college kids, were like
Yeah.
crazy
Loving
about
him,
Soupy.
right. I remember Soupy Sales.
And the scripts were, in all honesty, they were
Improv.
basically based on dirty jokes with
Yeah.
the punchlines taken out, but the kids all knew the punchlines
Right.
anyway.
That's smart.
And it was a great experience, and we were so successful that ABC, the network, decided to put it on Monday nights on the full network of ABC. So my first guest on that was Frank Sinatra, who called me and asked if Soupy would throw a pie in his face. And I found out later that Frank's son, Frank Jr., hung out and was kind of half raised by Soupy and his 2 sons. They were next door neighbors. And Frank wanted to repay him a favor by letting him hit him with a pie, which he did.
Wow.
The next guest was Tony Curtis, who was very big at that time. And then the third guest was Mickey Rooney. And then I got fired. What happened was the network program director, I still remember his name, Sandy Cummings, because after he got fired, he came to me for a job.
Oh my gosh.
But which is, you hear that story quite a bit in show business. But what happened was Sandy wasn't there when I was promoted to do the network show at the same time I'm doing 5 days a week, the local show. And he said, I don't want a local director doing my network shows. I want a network director. So he replaces me with a network director. And the director calls me at home and says, how do you direct?
How do you do this?
How do you do this? And I had to explain to him what I was
Well, how did that make you
doing.
feel? Because I always tell people, it's really good if you get fired in life, because first of all, you never think you're going to get fired because you usually go to work thinking you're good, and sometimes you get fired for nothing that you really did. But that had to take a blow out of you. You're this upcoming, you're young, and all of a sudden, hey, everything's going good. Network, I'm grandfathered in. Hey, by the way, Steve, we gotta let you go. I mean, how'd you feel?
Felt horrible. I
Horrible.
quit. I quit the local show.
Yeah, you
I
just said,
decided no
"I'm
more
out.
show
I'm
business
out."
for me.
Right.
So I went home planning to go back to school.
Oh wow, you just walked
And
away.
I got a call from my stage manager, Jimmy Baker, on Soupy.
Right.
And he said, listen, Steve Allen may be coming back, and he wants to finance a jazz series, which was called Jazz Scene USA, hosted by Oscar Brown Jr., who was very popular in that idiom from Chicago. And I got lucky enough to get hired by Steve to direct 26 half hours with the greatest jazz artists in America at the time.
Right.
Nancy Wilson, Shorty Rogers, Cannonball Adderley, Stan Kenton and his big band. It was phenomenal.
Right.
And I'm in the middle of doing that show at CBS.
So you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah, I went to quit. And that's what you're talking about, just to interrupt you for a second. In Hollywood, that's the kind of stuff that happens. You can get destroyed here thinking it's all over. And then, oh, by the way, I need you on this set.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the middle of it, I get a call, and it's the first time I ever spoke to him. Steve Allen calls me at home.
Yeah.
He said, "You're doing a wonderful job on the jazz series, and I just signed a contract with Westinghouse to do a 5-night-a-week, 90-minute a night
Wow.
late night show,
That's a long
and
time.
I want you to direct it." And I said, "I can't." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I haven't finished your jazz show yet, and I'm still working on it." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what you do. Get it started, and then I'll replace you." And 2 years later, he replaced me. But I had the greatest time in the whole world doing that Steve Allen show. And that was a time when Johnny Carson had just accepted NBC's late night show, but ABC had him under contract and wouldn't let him start the show.
Right.
And so we were the only popular late night show.
All right, until the Johnny Carson.
Until Johnny came on the air on the network, but we were syndicated, and we had the same enthusiasm from our audiences who would, months in advance try and get tickets to the live show, and it was so much fun. And in that time period, I got to meet everybody, not only in front of the camera but behind the camera, who either guest appeared on the Steve Allen show or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, Steve Allen show always had people popping in.
And then I was lucky enough where the TV critic of the LA Times was a gentleman named Cecil Smith. And Cecil wrote a whole article in the LA Times with my picture in it saying, how to succeed in show business,
With your phone.
and it talked about the jazz series and the Steve Allen show and how I was doing both of them at the same time, and then the phones just started ringing off the hook.
Let me ask you something, Steve. You heard the term imposter syndrome, an imposter.
No, what is it?
And that's when, did you ever feel when you were directing, because you're young, you're going that, if these guys really know how insecure I was or how I really felt like this is like too big of a job for me, did you ever get nervous when you get hired as a director and you're going, did you ever feel that, or did that ever happen to you?
Well, I have a new documentary out on Elvis Presley, and I actually talk about that. I think every actor, singer, dancer, director, producer, whatever, you can't help but say to yourself on the inside, am I an imposter?
Right, right. You feel like I'm going to get discovered, or someone better than me, and they're watching me.
Exactly. And I've always
Okay, good.
felt
Then
that.
it's not just me.
So that would be interesting to hear about that.
Yeah.
The show. I mean,
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
they-
Okay, so I mean, I want to keep talking about, because I want to know how we got. So what I remember about Steve, and I was hanging out with Steve for a while, is not all that background because I was before my time, but you always were involved more in musicals. I remember meeting Patti LaBelle with you. I remember
Smokey Robinson.
we were with Smokey Robinson many times, and you were super good at musical. Is that because when you're a kid you're like wanted to be the DJ, or you like records, or why were you so good at this particular genre, musicals, compared to like
Well, I think he
motion
was
pictures?
good. I think he was good at all of them, but I think
Yeah,
he
but it seemed like
gravitated a little bit towards that.
But but a Motown accepted him.
Right.
So he was almost like, you talk about diversity.
Progressive.
Steve, I want to talk about the time where you put, blacks and whites intermix. Because when you're from Southern California, at least us and him, we don't really think about that. But other parts of the United States are like, what's going
Well,
on
we weren't
here? It's a
as
big
divided
deal.
as the other countries.
Yeah, they're racist all over. But it seems like the Motown wanted you for them. I remember Patti LaBelle. I just remember specifically, if Steve's doing it, I'm in good hands. It's going to be a good show. And I was wondering why they were so attracted to you being the director. If you
Well,
ever thought about that question, huh? Because that's what stuck out of my mind when I kept going
I was
to.
thinking the same
I went
thing.
to Lionel Richie. I remember
Right.
we had to go get break dancers. There was this big show and they needed break dancers. Remember they auditioned and for some Lionel Richie something, and I'm like, man, this guy loves Motown and Motown loves him. That's what was in my mind. Does that make sense? Does it rekindle any memories?
The truth is, I always loved music. I mean, when I was a little kid,
like
the
us.
first album I ever got was 1930s broadcast live on CBS radio, and it was a song called, or it was more than just a song. It was a whole story song called "Ballad for Americans," and the lead singer was Paul Robeson, who was very, very famous, and eventually, he, because of the black racial thing in America, he defected to Russia in later years. And I was a voracious reader in those days, and I loved to read John Steinbeck and Grapes of Wrath and East of Eden, and they kind of influenced me. But I didn't focus on just doing variety. I've also done drama, and I did a motion picture. One of the first ones that I did was, I guess, the first rock and roll movie called The Tammy Show with, nobody could have predicted that. I think out of 10 acts on the show, 9 of them are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame today. And at the time I worked with them, we didn't even know that when the Stones were on, that Mick Jagger was going to be Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was going to be Diana Ross and the Supremes.
Right.
It was with Marvin Gaye. The biggest star on that show at the time was Leslie Gore, who had huge hits with It's Judy's Turn to Cry and so forth. And the Tammy Show is a lot more important today historically than it was
in
in
retrospect.
1964, I think it was, when I actually did it. I did a movie with James Whitmore, who was an A character actor, basically, in film, an ex-Marine. And James did a wonderful stage play called Give 'Em Hell, Harry, on the life of Harry Truman. And we filmed it, and it was a huge, artistic success, and did pretty well at the box office as well, independently. And so I don't know. I just, when I hear music, just about of any type, there's something, I try and go to symphonies, and when you're hearing a live orchestra with 100 pieces,
Right, it's unbelievable.
It's food for the soul.
Right.
And it just gives me a feeling that I can't even describe with words,
Right.
of how I feel. And being able to work with such incredible artists over the years. You mentioned, earlier on we talked about, Buffalo. And I did the last John Denver special before
he crashed.
his death.
Right.
And,
So you did the last one.
and we did it. It was called basically Montana Christmas Skies, and it was a Christmas special. But we shot it on an Indian reservation up in northern Montana, near the Missouri Breaks. And they had a herd of buffalo, and I got to go out there, and
awesome.
It was an awesome experience. I mean, just seeing them, and then all of a sudden, the lead buffalo was huge.
Yeah.
I remember, I may still have it, but I remember when they stampeded away from where we were with the Indians. I remember picking up hair from his tail and, and bringing it home. But when you think that the plains in states
Thousands of them.
Millions.
of millions,
Millions of
them,
buffalo.
Sorry,
and,
millions.
et cetera. And
Yeah,
then
probably good eating.
and then we talked about elephants, and I had a love affair with them, and
Yeah.
we were on the Steve Allen show one year, and we brought we had two things that stand out. One is we had a tug of war with our crew and an old elephant.
The elephant won.
And
course.
I'll never
They're so
forget it
strong.
because I asked the trainer what would happen because we had wooden barriers so the elephant wouldn't run down the street
Yeah.
live in Hollywood.
Right.
And I said, what would happen if we removed the barriers? And the trainer said, oh, he's an old elephant and he'll probably run out of breath halfway down the street. And,
Come back.
and that'll all that happened. So I told the crew, when we actually do this on the air live, take the barriers away and let's see what happens. And so, we opened the show and we had like 50 guys and gals from our crew on one end of this rope and the
Radio
elephant on the other end. And in one yank, you see 50 bodies flying on the pavement on the street. And then the elephant takes off.
Right.
And he's running down La Mirada in Hollywood. and the hysterical thing about it is, at the same time, coming from the opposite direction is a little Volkswagen.
Yeah.
And he turns onto the street, seeing this charging elephant coming at him. And you hear his gears grinding on his car as he backs up. And we never saw him again or talked to him. But
The
you
elephant?
can imagine,
Oh, no.
no, the
No,
guy
I'm
who was
kidding.
in the Volkswagen.
Yeah.
So
Should've
you can
interviewed that
imagine
guy.
his side of the story.
Right.
And then Sparks had a little tiny elephant that they used at their gambling casino in Nevada. And so we booked the little elephant and we parked him on the side street next to the theater, which became kind of famous, called La Mirada. And it was next to the Hollywood Ranch Market. And this little elephant I fell in love with, and every chance I had, I would run out to the elephant and talk to him.
Yeah.
And
They remember you. They're smart.
And anyway, right before we get ready to do our show, I go out, and his trunk is like a pretzel. It's all twisted, and I'm curious, and I get closer to him, and all of a sudden he rears his trunk back and sneezes the entire gutter on me from La Mirada. And I'm ready to go on the air, and I am covered from head to toe with
Elephant slime.
Yeah, exactly. And I snuck up into Steve's dressing room, and luckily we were almost the same size.
Yeah.
So I took a shower in his dressing room real quick, put on his clothes. To this day, unfortunately, Steve passed away quite a few years ago, but he never knew what I had done and what had happened out on the street with this little elephant. But I've had so many great experiences
Such a
like
good
that.
life. That reminds me of a story I'm going to tell you right now. Maybe you remember. We were going to go to the Emmys, and I was going with you, but I had nothing to wear. Okay, but I had clothes, but I'm like, I can't go. I'll just hang here. It's the Emmys. And you go, no, I have a suit. Try this on. It was one of. You told me it was one of Elvis Presley's suits you had from a movie, and you had it in your closet. And I put it on, and it fit me perfect.
I didn't have any Elvis
so,
Presley suits.
Okay, so there was a suit that you said.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember. Maybe you're bullshitting me, but you said this is a suit, and it came off of a Elvis set, and I put on it. It was like 40 trigger. I'm like, what? So I wore that.
Yeah,
And I was always
may
wondering.
have.
So you were just BSing me. So I really thought it was like. I'm telling you said that to me. The thing this is one of the things that I think this is one of. Something about Elvis. I'm like, I know you knew the guy because.
He just wants you to return the suit.
Yeah,
It's been 40 years. It's time to give it back.
But what I was going to tell you is that when I was talking to my mom, because my mom used to talk, she goes in her accent, because she's neurotic Jewish, tell Steve you still have the suit. You must return it. It's in my closet.
It's true.
And I'm like, she called me today. I'm like, what suit? And she brought up this huge memory. I'm like, what? Don't you remember you're going to she's remind me. I'm like, yeah, I remember something like that. But anyway, there's a suit.
It could have been.
Yeah. So
the actual costume designer of the Presley special that I did was a great designer named Bill Ballou.
yeah.
And Bill actually made me a suit, and that may be what you're referring
Oh,
to.
maybe that
Probably.
is, but it fit me good, and I was wearing it. And I just remember going like, "Okay, Ma, it's not like I'm trying to rip the
She
guy off."
remembers
All sorts of
Rami
yeah. Your daughter?
talking to your mom at the house, and they would, like, your daughter and your mom would talk all the time, and they were just like the really nice conversations they would have. I mean, that was a long time ago, and I think they had gas stations or something.
My dad had a service station downtown near the L.A. market. And, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I was so blessed with having great parents. And
Yeah, so are we.
who really, yeah, I know. And Rami always, my youngest daughter,
Yeah.
always thought your mother was like her
Yeah.
second mother. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
she really...
yeah.
you know, great fond memories. But I think we all are shaped as children by
Our parents.
the environment and our parents. And my parents, who never had any of the things that my sister and I were given by them, you know, devoted their life to us,
Right.
and we never knew we were poor.
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
were,
same here.
We were middle class, you
Right,
know,
right.
basically. But as an example, I have an older sister, and when she went to high school, her biggest complaint was that all her girlfriends had 3 or 4 cashmere sweaters, and she only had one.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't realize she was lucky to get the
Right,
one
exactly.
because
Right.
it was a real struggle for my parents to afford to give us things like that. And yet, you know, my dad vicariously, as much as I loved my parents, and I truly love them, you know, I have great regrets that I should have and could have done so much more for them. Now that I matured into somebody who really could appreciate what they had devoted to their children to give us good educations, though they never, they barely finished high school because they could never afford to go to a college. My dad had to work to support his family. And, and I'm sure he hated, I don't know if he hated, but certainly didn't think of himself as ending up pumping gasoline and changing tires
Right.
for his whole life.
Right.
And, he didn't speak a lot, but when he spoke, it meant so much to me. I remember when I was in Europe, my mother would send me care packages of food and write these long letters to
That's
me.
Jewish mom.
And my dad would do 1 or 2 lines at the bottom of
Right.
her letter, and that meant so much to me.
Dad
you know?
wrote me. Yeah, but that's a lot of people. I think they come to a point in their life where they look back and they go, you know, I wish I would have said something or told them how much you love them. And it happens all the time. So I would say that anyone who has a chance to do that, you know, don't wait. You know, tell those people that you love what they mean to you, because you'll be surprised, and, you know, ask them those questions like, you know, what I'm asking my mom, what was your best day of your life, or what, you know, what made you had the most fun, and you'll end up having these good conversations when you get older, because you finally realize this is just one person, my dad, who met another person, my mom. They didn't know each other, because when you back in the day, you just think they were all together, like they're just this couple, and you're their kid, and they're 2 magical people, but they're 2 individuals that had different lives. So it's fun to do the history. So make sure you tell people you love them.
There was a film, and that's great advice, Frank. There was a film by Ilya Kazan, and then Barry Levinson made one, as well on their families and their roots. And they were really interesting because in both cases, what really tore them apart was economics, money.
Yeah.
The richer any member of the family got, they would leave the neighborhood with their brothers and sisters
Behind.
and cousins and aunts and uncles and what have you, and they'd move to a nicer neighborhood or whatever. But in the beginning, and I remember growing up, all my uncles and aunts on both sides of my mother and father's family, we were all one big unit,
Right.
basically,
Same here, yeah,
living in the same environment.
Same neighborhood, same economical status. That really does keep the family together. And you're right, when somebody like succeeds or goes a different route, it kind of breaks up that. But yeah, I guess being broke keeps you tight.
I have a good question for Steve. I don't know if it's a good question, but it's a question. So through this interview, you've named a lot of people, like really famous people that have made a
legendary
mark on America and has made a mark on the world. Frank Sinatra and all these people. Of all of these people that you've met, is there one person that really sticks out, that really made an impression on you?
That was me.
Other than Frank. Frank does that to everybody.
They basically, I've had the opportunity to work a lot with Diana Ross.
Mm-hmm.
When you work for Diana, she makes you feel like you're the best. And, we've had this incredible relationship over the years. Excuse me. Culminating probably with Central Park during the huge
Diana Ross in
rainstorm.
Central Park. I remember that.
But, with all the stories of, Diana's ego and how difficult she is and so forth, I've had this great relationship with her, not just as an entertainer relationship with a director, but, she's
Kind, would you say? Very kind person?
not necessarily I'd say yes, but that's not
Right.
what outstanding. What's outstanding is the commitment she makes to every project she does. She gives you everything she's got. And, she's fun to put pictures to. Here's a perfect example of what we were just talking about. And organically, something happens while I'm shooting a song. First time I worked with Diana, which was early on a CBS special that Michael Jackson was on and Quincy Jones was on and Larry Hagman from
I Dream
Dallas
of
was
Jeannie.
on, etc. And I shot it at CBS, and then I showed it to her after, and she was doing a song from The Wiz called Home. And there was this very specific emotional moment, and she turned to me and she said, "You can't use that shot." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, you can see my veins in my neck when I'm hitting a high note, and I don't want to use it. I think it looks ugly." And I said, "Diane, if I pull back at this perfect moment of, the song and the emotion and you singing, it would be a real mistake, and I want to leave that shot. If people are looking at your veins or your neck while you're singing, you've missed the whole point of what we're doing." And so she bought into it, and she said, "Okay." And then the show got great reviews, and after that, she never questioned my judgment. I mean, we just had, she wanted to come to editing. Well, all stars want to come to editing, but editing is boring if you really don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as an observer, it's a lot different than if you're actually doing it yourself.
Yes.
And she would last about 15 minutes or so and say, "I'll see you when it's finished," and so forth. but I've always enjoyed working with her. Early on in my career, I had the great opportunity for a few years to work closely with Burt Lancaster, the actor. And, we did a lot of anti-war projects while the Vietnam War was raging on and so forth. And I loved working. The bigger the star was, the less ego. And I found over the years, in so many cases, I've been so lucky because I've been able to work with people who, when you walk on a stage, they don't give you the attitude of, I'm the star, I'm in control, I call the shots. It's a team.
Yeah.
When I worked with Elvis Presley, from the very first day, we were totally together on trying to accomplish the same thing, which is to have Elvis rediscover himself and his own talent. And I was the director, he was the star, but I didn't put him on a pedestal. I didn't treat him like he was special.
Exactly.
Because he was the star and so famous. And I think he gave me the respect which made me want to
do it more.
Make it great. And
was he easy? Then he was easy to work with, or did he need a lot of directing and say, no, Elvis, do this and that, or did he have like this natural?
He was too easy to work with. He never questioned anything that I asked him to do or redo or whatever. And it was incredible that on a television special, that an artist of that magnitude worked so hard to be so good on it every step of the way. I mean, whether it was the gospel segment or the guitar man sequence, he gave 100% of himself every single thing he did on the special. And when I look at the special now, which is over 50 years ago, 1968, I feel like I could have shot it this year.
Right.
It's not dated at all. I mean, usually on a show, a costume, a set, a prop, whatever, dates the show where it was done years ago. In this Elvis show, for whatever reason, and it's getting so much play right now between Baz Luhrmann's Warner Brothers movie that was so successful to the hundreds of books that have been written on it and the stories that are told about it, etc. And then with this new documentary that Paramount and my book partner, Spencer Proffer and John Scheinfeld, the documentary director, I'm real proud of it because it really tells the story from an honest standpoint. There's no BS in it.
Right.
There's no stroking and distorting who he really was. And I think at some given point, especially when I got into the improv portion of the show, where he really rediscovered himself at that moment. I could see it in his body posture. I could see it in his attitude and so forth. There was no holding back. He knew this was make or break, and
he made it.
One of the I always use an example. I did years ago a Debbie Boone special, and she had just come off a big hit record, and NBC was touting her as their new star. And I loved doing this special. We did it in Detroit, practically all in location. We're at the Detroit Art Museum for one of the production numbers. We're at a laundromat to do a dance number
Right.
on all the machinery. And I always said to myself, because we were not acknowledged at the end, it was an original musical that a writer that I had worked with on the big show had written, and it was about a company trying to get the Broadway to open on Broadway with a Broadway show. And at the time, she was actually doing that with a production of Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
There was a movie too for that.
But anyway, we took advantage of that troupe being there and bonding together and so forth, and we wrote an original musical based on trying to get to Broadway. And it didn't get any, rave anything. We didn't get any Emmys for it or what have you. But I always felt, if I had a hot artist that year, like a Barbra Streisand, it might have won a whole bunch of gold statues and so forth. And timing and luck has a lot to do with all of our careers and our futures. And I do a lot of teaching. And I spent 25 years teaching a directing and producing class at USC. And I have an army of students who took my class, who many still stay in touch. And one in particular is a super successful author, Brad Thor, who has a slew of hit books put out by Simon & Schuster. I understand he signed a movie deal where they're going to start making movies of his book characters. And but I always tell my students the one key and part of my success is I never tried to lie to anybody or to fake something I didn't know. If I didn't know something,
like you
I
said that
asked
earlier.
people. There are all kinds of people out there to help you, and I've been blessed with my crews of camera people and audio and lighting and sound and that's my education. I went from grammar school to get my master's doctorate degree by the knowledge I picked up from
the
all
other
these
people.
pros who are more than willing to share their talent and their information with you if you just are honest with them. You just level with them. And I can't tell you all the director of photography. I got the privilege to work with some of the greatest, Laszlo Kovacs comes to mind. I used a lot of the David Wolper documentary cinematographers. I got to work. I did a show that only aired once on CBS for 2 hours in prime time called Rolling Stone Magazine. It was their anniversary. I don't remember which one, whether it was the 10th or the 30th. I don't know. And it was so far ahead of its time that it got completely ignored. But I had Martin Sheen on it and Sissy Spacek and Bette Midler with Jerry Lee Lewis singing Great Balls of Fire, and I had Gladys Knight and the Pips sing with Art Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Right.
And, there's some classic things in it. But it as I said, it was, I either got a fan letter saying it's the greatest show I ever watched on television, or it's the worst show I ever watched on television. And that's okay with me. I mean, the end result is, it's in the hands of the viewer, and they control, has a lot to do with what time slot you're in, how much promotion the networks are going to give you, and advertising and so forth. And the one thing I've learned is the more time after you do a project that you have to spend promoting it and telling people when it's going to be on the air and how they can watch it and so forth, the better. Because I always wanted my shows to air instantly the minute I finished them. And I realized there's no time to promote them or advertise them and so forth. But one of the shows that pops into my mind that I love doing was the Olivia Newton-John special.
Really? Yeah.
And I had guest stars were ABBA and Andy Gibb from the Gibb family.
ABBA, the
And-
group, the band ABBA.
Yeah, and
nice.
I think it was their first appearance in America on a
Yeah. Are
variety
they from
special.
Sweden or something?
But-
Sweden?
Yeah, they sold more gross product in Sweden than the Volvo car did.
Wow.
They were so
Yeah, they're
popular
huge.
in their day. But I had them all singing backgrounds for each other. I didn't hire background singers. I said, when Olivia is singing, Andy and ABBA will support her with the background singing, and when ABBA's on, Olivia and Andy and so forth. And it was a wonderful experience because they bonded.
Right.
I did the same thing with when I did John Denver's last special, is that, he brought his band with him, and I had them basically with the guest stars that I put on the show, all do self-contained, all their musical numbers and the background singing and so forth. And they enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't a case of, it's beneath us to be singing backgrounds to a lead singer. It was just the opposite. They loved it.
Good.
And they had a lot of fun, just plain old, singing like they probably did before they were famous,
So with Elvis, the one thing you mentioned that I thought was interesting, actually was good, is that a lot of the books that are written about him and a lot of the documentaries are third person, like hearsay. I know a guy who knows a guy who did this. But yours is different because it's first person, correct?
Yeah, when I did Elvis, it was the first time nobody from the Elvis Presley world was even involved. At one point, Elvis asked me to hire his musical director who was all tied up with Nancy Sinatra at the time, Billy Strange. And at some point, before we even began pre-production, I fired him and brought in my own musical director who had worked with me on the Olivia Newton-John, who had worked with me on the Petula Clark, Harry Belafonte special. And preceding that, he had worked with me on the Leslie Uggams, who was starring on Broadway at the time. And it was very famous for the Mitch Miller show on television, where you kind of followed the bouncing ball and sang along and so forth. But that's the crew. And out of all of the 30-some people that I put together, going back to my Hullabaloo days, this entire group was handpicked to be the brain thrust of the specials. And it was... we'd have a think tank, and I didn't care what your title was, whether you were the cue card holder or the head writer or whatever. We were all equal. We just threw away our titles and our how much salary we're being paid, which was nothing in those days. And we just sat bouncing around. You have a blank piece of paper, you have a star, what are you going to do for an hour? And we would just build layer after layer of somebody come up with an idea and somebody say, I have a better idea on top of that, and so forth. And they don't do that these days.
Brainstorming, they call it.
It's all about money now. It's about, the least we
Clicks.
have to, the least we have to hire somebody and bring them in early and pay them, the better, So after we conceive what the show is, then we'll hire the producer and the director and the writers and so forth and so on.
They did it opposite.
How was Elvis with you? Just like you're in between sets, you're talking to Elvis. Normal guy, hyper,
Totally.
stressed, mellow? or?
For me, totally normal. And I was not a fan of Elvis when I started into this whole thing, and I became a huge fan after I realized it wasn't Colonel Parker and his publicity machine. It was an RCA Records and their publicity machine. this guy was special and really had the talent.
Is it true that he didn't? I heard he didn't take any singing lessons. Is that right? It was just,
I don't know. I didn't ask
yeah,
him.
that's what I heard. You think it was going with Frank Sinatra and Frank Sinatra.
I don't know. I don't think they had guitar lessons or singing lessons.
Well,
I'm sure they
interestingly
did.
enough, he always put himself down as a guitar player, and yet every guitarist I ever met who had worked with Elvis or really known him well, totally respected.
Right.
You know, there's a young kid who won, I think, American Idol or something, who was on the show, who was born 20 years after Elvis had passed, but now devoted his life to being a tribute artist to Elvis. And he when he talked on the documentary, it's as if he knew Elvis first person, because he had studied him so carefully and so forth. And it was a good, perspective of why the Elvis name and image is so popular right now, is because he's adding new generations to his fan base. And
That's
you know,
nice. The king
it,
lives on.
Who made that design? I all see the Elvis in this big letters, ELVIS, and then he's standing there with a guitar. Is that something that came out of?
my art director was Gene McAvoy, and Gene was the art director on the CBS Judy Garland series. And I remember when she did her show, she had a big In Lights Judy.
Okay.
And I thought,
So you thought of that?
what would be better than
Yeah.
to do it with the Elvis name?
Yeah, I love that. That's
And,
like such a good image, because it's like that's the thing that always sticks. I think it sticks out with a lot of viewers. When you think of Elvis, I always picture that big sign and he's standing there, he's holding his guitar.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's
Well, I'll
so
tell
that was
you-
your idea.
I'll tell you an interesting story is that when the head writer of the special, Alan Bly, came to me, and we were planning the opening where he sings, if you're looking for trouble, you came to the right place.
We gotta get Steve some water. Let me grab a cup of water. You keep talking, but give me a second, or just keep rolling. But I want to get Steve a cup of water.
Okay.
Thank you.
I hope that's okay, Romy.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I go here? Okay. Poor guy's been talking forever.
Frank's the water boy.
I'll take that. Steve,
Like
got
the water
on
boy.
set?
He didn't think about me, his
You-
brother. He just like,
The water comes from the thing.
Yeah.
Rami, can you show him?
He's doing it.
Oh, okay.
I got you.
the filtered
I'll
water.
get you one too, Mark, since you're crying.
You can get me
Anyway, the writer, the head writer came to me and he said, "Steve, do you think we could get 100 Elvises in that opening shot? Where
Right.
you
100
pull
Elvises?
back from Elvis, and behind him, you see people look like Elvis
Right.
in the
Yeah,
background."
I got you.
And so I had a great executive producer on the Elvis special, Bob Finkel. And Bob never got involved in the creative process, but what he did, which was brilliant, he kept Colonel Parker away from me and Elvis, and we were able to work together, one-on-one, which really, is amazing to me. I didn't even appreciate it until years later when I thought about the job that Finkel
Yeah,
had done.
he threw interference, because I heard that Parker guy was always like so controlling over Elvis, everything he did. And obviously, he was jealous when anyone else would come in. And what he didn't like, I think, he probably didn't like you that much. I'm just assuming you're going to answer this, but you were getting tight with Elvis, and Elvis was starting to listen to you above and beyond how he was trying to control him. Would that be a good analysis?
Yeah, well, Elvis had made a decision before we even started the special that he was he wasn't going to listen to Colonel Parker, and he was going to listen to anything that I had to say. So I never knew that until afterwards, when Priscilla told me that when Elvis came home from my first meeting with him, he said, "I have a gut feeling about this Pinder kid, and I'm going to go with whatever he wants me to do. And no
How
matter
did he
what,
find you?
no matter what the colonel says.
Well, I mean, what was? I mean, you're California. You're like us. You're a Southern California Beach Boy guy. He's Memphis, Tennessee, singing country. How did that meeting ever occur? Like, why would he think there's this? How did he know about you? Or did someone else
Because-
know? How'd you meet him?
Preceding that, I had done a major special with Petula Clark and Harry Belafonte. And
right.
it became an international
Sure.
news story when Petula touched Harry on his forearm.
Yeah, put it. Yeah.
So Petula
And,
is a white female,
Well,
Harry
maybe, but,
Blonde, blue-eyed.
blonde, blue eye.
and-
Then Harry
and
Belafonte was
black.
African American, black.
Right.
And there was a scene where they come out. I remember where she touches his arm.
oh,
Or
and
did
they're
they dance?
No,
Did
no.
they
He,
kiss?
he touches her arm, and they go, "Cut that! You cannot use that with."
Who said that?
I think a lot of people said that you can't have.
Well,
No,
this
but
white-
Steve let it go. It was Steve's show.
Well,
No,
Let's
but
hear
it
what-
was
let's
the
hear what
representative.
happened.
We were sponsored by Plymouth Cars.
okay.
Oh.
And the
Oh,
representative
I see.
from Plymouth was racist.
Yeah.
Nothing else to say.
Right.
And he did not want a black man on the show. Period.
Oh, and even
So
want him on
we
the
had a
show.
lot of-
Forget about the blonde touching.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had a lot of confrontations before we ever
Oh.
started the show, and
Whose idea was that to touch? Whose idea was it?
there was no idea.
Yeah, it
it
just came
happened
naturally.
organically. It
Right,
just
like
happened.
normal-
They're singing an anti-war song,
Right.
and they were both very emotional while they were singing.
So it wasn't even a strategic thing. It's just like, this is normal stuff. And you got the racist calling. Okay, I got you.
And but that's what attracted NBC to call me because they had a deal with Colonel Parker to finance. Elvis couldn't get any financing for his next movie, or the Colonel couldn't. So they went to the networks, which they had lots of money, and he asked NBC if they would finance Change a Habit with Mary Tyler Moore in Elvis's next movie. And Tom Sarnoff, who was running NBC at the time, wanted to do it, and he said, we'll put up the money for the movie if Elvis will do a 1-hour television special.
Oh, I see. Leverage.
Elvis had already told Colonel Parker he didn't want to do television anymore. He hated it. It wasn't his turf.
Got it.
And when he told me that, I said, "What's your turf?" And he said, "Making records." And I said, "Okay, then you make a record and I'll put pictures to it." And
There you go.
and he said that's the key that made him relax and believe in me. And it was my experience with Elvis was less than a year. From the first day to the last day that I said goodbye to him, and I never talked to him or saw him again.
Gotcha.
But the Colonel, he was threatened by Anne Margaret when they made Viva Las Vegas, and she was persona non grata, like I was after we had done our thing with him. And Elvis was, for whatever reason, he was afraid to stand up to the Colonel. I mean, the Colonel
It seemed like at the end he
had
was
so much.
right, power, psychological power over him or something.
Well, he knew where all his weaknesses were. He knew where all the buttons were
Right.
to control him. And if he couldn't control him, he'd go to his father, who he played like a Stradivarius. And his father was, had felt the Colonel was their ticket out of poverty. And he didn't want to defy anything that the Colonel wanted. And he told Elvis, do it, and Elvis listened to his parents. He was a kid from the South.
Right. Respect your
Good
elders,
kid.
respect your mom and dad.
And, but I don't think his mother liked Colonel Parker very much, Gladys. And but I had no knowledge of Elvis other than I saw him on the Ed Sullivan Show when I wasn't even in show business and liked him.
Right.
And then after that, he became a caricature
Right.
of himself.
What about
And,
that one? There's this one thing that I remember you telling me way back in the day. It's probably in your documentary. But I remember this from 40 years ago. You said, we were talking about Elvis, there was a time where he came up to your studio or something and he was saying how great he is with the Colonel Parker. And you go, I bet you can go on the street right now. No one would even ask for your autograph. and
Well-
like Sunset Boulevard.
You have the essence of it, but that's
Yeah.
not
Okay,
what
so
really
recount
happened.
all my memory. I mean, do you recall that?
I
at all?
remember Elvis walking in the office, and our office overlooked Sunset Boulevard.
right?
He was looking out the window, staring. He came to my office around 4 in the afternoon, and he came in and he was staring out the window. And I said, "What are you looking at?" And he said, "Oh, nothing. I just." And I said, "What do you think would happen if you and I went out there and just stood on the street on Sunset Boulevard?" And he smiled and he said, What do you think would happen?" And I said, "Well,
Nothing.
you know, do you think they'd tear your clothes off? Do you think there'd be a mini riot or
Right.
whatever?" And that was the end of it. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 days later when he walked in the office and he said, "Okay, Steve, let's go." And I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "We're going to test out your theory. We're going to go down on Sunset Boulevard." The truth of the matter is that we didn't advertise that Elvis was in Los Angeles at the time.
Right.
I think there were so many characters walking around
Acting like Elvis.
Hollywood trying to look like Elvis with
It's
the long
impossible.
sideburn.
Right.
I think they thought he was
Yeah,
another
impossible.
lookalike.
Right.
They didn't realize it was really Elvis because they might have torn
They
his
might have
clothes up if they did know it was really him.
That's true.
And but I never told him that. And when we went back upstairs, he was convinced that the magic was gone and the audiences had passed him up, and now we're into the Stones and the Beatles and all the
Right.
British invasion.
Right, the British invasion.
And, but it built more confidence in him trusting me. And I've always said in a lot of interviews, I think all of us need a Jiminy Cricket on our shoulder.
No, you're
Somebody
right.
whispering in our ears saying, "Tell
Exactly.
the truth," And I never lied to Elvis. I told him exactly what I felt. In fact, one time, which has been quoted a lot lately, but he asked me what I thought of his career. First question. And I said, "I think it's in the toilet." And at first, I didn't know how he was going to
Right.
take it. It just blurted out. I mean, it was the truth. And then he burst out laughing and he said, "Finally, somebody's leveling with me and telling me the truth."
That's the best way to be. You can't get anywhere without the truth, right? You can, you're doing great, and what happens after that? How remarkable. I'm going to ask you, do you mind if I tell, do you mind if you say, I can ask how old you are? Because I think this is incredible, what you've done, and you're still going. And it's so amazing to me.
He's 45.
You're 45? Okay.
45.
Because the way you look, the way you are, what you've done, and how you keep
And
going. Sharp. Your memory, my God, you don't even
With names.
Yeah, you don't even remember first names, first and last names, title. I can't remember that. You got like genius mind. How you recall so good. So that's what I was gonna say. Like,
Well, I had a very funny story on the Emmys. The Emmy scripts are like, at least 3 to 5 inches thick.
Yeah.
And they have hundreds of camera shots and so forth in them. And I usually, right before we start doing a show, especially if it's live, I will go out and just spend a minute just, mentally relaxing myself, and then I walk back into the control room to start directing. I walked back in the control room on this one Emmy show, and no script. It's not there. I can't believe it. I mean, I'm starting this live international show.
what do you mean no
with
script?
millions of people, and I can't.
Can't find it?
There's no script sitting on my director, panel.
Right.
And it turns out that the CBS program director, he picked it up by mistake and thought it was his script.
Oh no.
Walks out. Well, luckily, like 5 seconds before we're on the air, somebody found him and ran in and threw the script at me, and I open it up and take one. We're on the air, and we're doing it. And
Jeez.
that was panic time, because as good as my memory is, and I do have kind of a photographic memory. Once I do a show, I remember every single
Detail.
Unfortunately,
Right.
everything good and bad,
Right.
in the script, and I know it pretty cold and so forth. Central Park, I improvised that whole thing. I had it all scripted until the rain hit, and then I said, "The hell with the
Did you guys
script."
even know rain was going to come?
We were warned that there was a storm heading our way, but the irony is it was a bright, sunny day in New York.
Right. That's how the movie.
Right.
That's
There
how it
was
started.
sunshine everywhere except where we were. It was there was one shot where you could see the sun in the circle perimeter around where we shot in Central Park, and now we're having this not just rain,
Like
we're having
deluge.
a deluge of lightning and rain and what have you, and all of our electronic equipment was blowing out. We ended up with just having a 10K light, lighting her, which the reviewers said it looked like it was lit by God, and it did. It was fabulous, and you could see
Worked out.
So you made it,
normally,
yeah. You made it work.
normally you don't see rain on an electronic camera. And that's why they put milk
Right.
in it and so forth, so it'll show up.
Right.
We had no problem with Central Park. Boy, it was just pouring, and you could see the rain coming down. And she was a real trooper. I mean, we were really worried that there could be some real serious incidents, of people being hurt while they were leaving the park and so forth and so on. And we did. I have a lot of mugging that went on, that people talk about to this day. I run into people who say I was there, and I was having lunch in there's a very famous restaurant nearby in the park, and they evidently the customers at the restaurant were attacked, and jewelry ripped off of their necks and wrists and so forth, and
Still.
Yeah, still
Still
it's been
today.
going on for years.
For a decade.
Well, Steve, listen. You did this documentary. We already heard the buzz is incredible. It's all over. We all know what's going to happen. I think that this is the one that people been waiting for. The first time somebody heard a story about Elvis firsthand. And I wanted to thank you, but I want to also thank you because what I really wanted to know is the way I looked up to you. And I'm just going to tell the truth. When I was on a set with you, the kindest, most respectful, never yelled. I've never heard you yell. In my life, I've never heard you yell. And I've been I was at your house all the time. And people had the utmost respect on the set, and they would just listen to you. And you always were cool. Like, you had the number one cool factor. You're always just in a good mood, calm, and very methodical. And I've been on other sets where people aren't like that in directors because they have this certain power and they have an ego, and they're yelling and screaming. So I wanted people to also see what you've done, because it's not just something you came across as Elvis special, but you have a whole history of music. So the King of Rock was led by this Steve, who started in Motown, came up through spinning records as a DJ in the war. And so it's almost like it was meant to happen, you two to meet.
Well, the Motown is kind of blown out of proportion. I did do a series with Smokey.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what I knew, so
it's
that's-
called the Motown Review.
Yes.
Right.
I remember.
And it had all the Motown acts in it. But, I'm very proud in the documentary when Anita Mann, who is considered one of America's top dance choreographers in television, she said, I think Steve is colorblind. He doesn't pay any attention
That's a good
to...
compliment.
Right.
We all
And
should.
it was a great compliment.
Right.
Right.
And I've always felt that. I never set out to make a statement. All these things
It's
that
just
have happened
natural.
to me
Right.
just happened,
Right.
and I had to deal with them on
Right.
the spot.
Right. It wasn't like you're in the Civil
Well, your
War.
actions make the statement.
Yeah, you're just a real deal.
It just like, okay.
Steve, do you,
Well,
have
I
any,
appreciate it.
do you have anything else you want to say?
It's
you haven't
great.
said already
I
is
can't
good.
believe 40 years have
Yeah.
passed
I
since
can't.
I've
I
seen
can't
you
believe I
guys.
see you, and it's like
And-
so weird. I just like I've seen you yesterday. Like that's when you know you're tight with someone. You can come back to their world in 40 years, and I still feel like I'm sitting in Brentwood with you, and we're just BSing. It's so awesome. So I really thank you for allowing us to come into your house.
I appreciate it,
doing this.
and I appreciate both you guys and your mom and your sister.
Yeah,
Hi.
Jet,
And,
Judy, Benji, all of them.
yeah,
They all
and,
say hi. So can I end just doing my Elvis impression?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is that good?
Yeah, it was really good.
All right.
And your lip went up too.
Hey.
Frank has left the building.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks,
right.
everyone.
That's a wrap, guys.
Yeah, you know what to do.
Thank
It's a
you, guys.
wrap, and we appreciate it. Look, I was going to get my headphones off.
Yeah.
I didn't wear
No
them.
headphones. Yay.
Wow.